A Jasper-based company has announced board of directors appointments and quarterly dividends. We'll tell you more about that. Plus, the Northeast Dubois School District is partnering with the Dubois County Community Foundation. We'll have more from last night's Northeast Dubois School Board meeting, and Joseph Shanebeckler talks about the upcoming Harvest Home Festival on Inform. All of that and much more is up next here on the 18 WJTS News. Hello, I'm Bradford Raths. We begin tonight with news from Kimball International's annual meeting. The Jasper-based company announced that it has elected all 7 of the individuals that were nominated to the board of directors for next year at their annual meeting, which was held yesterday. 6 of those members, Douglas Habig, James Tinn, Donald Sharon, Christine Vujovic, Jeffrey Stringer, and Thomas Tischhauser, were elected to represent the company's Class A share owners, while Dr. Jack Wentworth was elected to represent the company's Class B share owners. The company also declared its quarterly dividend during yesterday's meeting. The dividend for Class B common stock came out to 5 cents per share this quarter, while Class A common stock was declared at 4.5 cents per share, payable on January 15th of next year to share owners of record as of Christmas Eve of this year. In additional notes, the Class A share owners of Kimball ratified the appointment of accounting firm Deloitte & Touche LLP as the independent registered public accounting firm for fiscal year 2014. The Class A share owners also approved the Kimball International amended and restated 2003 stock option and incentive plan. Kimball International provides a variety of products from its 2 business segments, the electronic manufacturing services and furniture segments. In the electronic manufacturing services segment, they provide engineering and manufacturing services which utilize common production and support capabilities to a variety of industries across the world. The furniture segment provides furniture for the office and hospitality industries sold under the company's family of brand names. To learn more about Kimball International, you can visit Kimball.com. In other news this evening, an accident along Club Road left a Birdseye woman with minor injuries yesterday evening. Dubois County Sheriff's deputies say 18-year-old Sarah Brosmer of Birdseye was traveling northbound on Club Road, north of County Road 825 East, just before 9:05 p.m. last night when the accident took place. Deputies say Brosmer's vehicle hit loose gravel, causing her to overcorrect, and the vehicle left the roadway. Brosmer's vehicle landed on its roof in a nearby ditch. Brosmer suffered minor injuries, according to sheriff's deputies, and she was taken to Memorial Hospital for treatment. Her car sustained between $2,000 and $5,000 worth of damage, according to sheriff's deputies. A local school district is partnering with the Dubois County Community Foundation for help with scholarship funding for its students. At last night's school board meeting, Northeast Dubois School Superintendent Bill Hoeksong announced a partnership between the Northeast Dubois Scholarship Endowment Fund and the DCCF to fund more scholarships for students going forward. Hoeksong says after being approached by the DCCF, the scholarship committee thought it would be a good move for the future.
The Dubois County Foundation came to us and said they'd like to partner with us and take our assets and move them into them, and what they could do for us to increase our revenues. And the committee thought it was a really good idea and voted to go with that and do that partnership. And we're happy to partner with the Dubois County Foundation.
Hoeksong says the committee tries to give out roughly 6 scholarships per year to students across the district. He says moving forward, more money will be necessary for scholarships.
Well, what we're hoping it does is a few things. One, we're hoping it, as I said, increases our revenue in those funds, which, right now a $500 scholarship may be okay, but 10, 15 years down the road, that needs to be bumped up to more. So that's an opportunity for us to do that. It's an opportunity for us for maybe even give more scholarships. So it's definitely going to impact us financially and what we can do to give scholarships to our students.
In other business, at last night's meeting, the board formally approved the district's capital projects and bus replacement funds. The rest of the budget has already been approved by the Dubois County Council, as the board is an appointed board rather than an elected one. The board also approved all fundraisers submitted to the school board for the current school year at last night's meeting. Additionally, the board approved the policies for privacy on dental and vision insurance, and these policies are governed through the Southern Indiana School Trust, or SIST. The board also heard a report from District Curriculum Director Kathy Clawwitter concerning this year's ISTEP results, and we'll have more on that coming up later in this newscast. In final notes from last night, the board heard that 96 students will be taking part in an upcoming trip to Washington, D.C. That trip is slated to take place from October 23rd through the 27th in conjunction with the district's October 24th through the 28th fall break. Parent-teacher conferences begin tomorrow evening for the Northeast Dubois District and will continue on next Tuesday, October the 22nd. The conferences will be held from 4 till 8 p.m. both days. A new IRS ruling that goes into effect in January could impact the way that you tip your waiter or waitress when you go out to eat. The IRS ruled earlier this year that automatic gratuities, generally tacked on for parties of 8 or more people, will be treated as a service charge rather than a gratuity. This means that servers will no longer have the responsibility to report automatic tips as income. The change is leaving restaurants wondering whether to tack the gratuity onto the bill or whether to leave it in the customer's hands to decide how much to tip. However, one local restaurant is not expecting much of an effect at this point. Jasper's Schnitzelbank restaurant currently does not even add the gratuity, according to Schnitzelbank co-owner Alan Hanselman. Hanselman says his restaurant should feel little effect as a result.
We have never added them unless, some groups do ask us to go ahead and figure in a tip, but we normally don't do it unless they ask us to do it. So I don't see it affecting us much at all, because we've never done business that way.
Hanselman says he doesn't see a huge effect on the customer with this policy, as most of the effect will be focused on the restaurants.
I think it's going to shock some of these people that are doing it on these service charges that they're going to have a hard time keeping waitresses. These waitresses were used to that 18% tip. Now if they don't give the service, they ain't going to get nothing. They didn't have to work for it. Now they're going to have to work for it to get that tip out of the customer. So I think some of these restaurants are going to have trouble keeping their servers in there.
Hanselman says he sees server turnover as a big potential problem for some restaurants, though he says there is another option.
I think so. Or the waitresses are going to have to be retrained to give a little bit better service. Otherwise, that customer's just not going to give it. I mean, right now they're being forced to give it, where now they're going to have to work for it. So I don't know. I think they'll have a higher turnover rate as far as the waitresses are concerned, especially if they aren't getting tipped.
Currently, servers in Indiana are set at a base wage of $2.13 per hour before any tips. Industry analysts have stated that the ruling could be a way for the IRS to crack down on many servers who do not give a full report on the amount of tip money that they make. Under the new rules, servers would not get the money from automatic gratuities at the end of their night, since it would be a service charge. The service charges would be tacked onto paychecks as wages. The change could also mark the end for a tax credit that restaurants receive for paying Medicare and Social Security taxes on tips that servers receive. Service charges are not eligible for the income tax credit per IRS policy. Additional impacts could be felt in the hiring of employees, as experts say that restaurants may hire fewer new employees if they have to take on more costs in order to comply with all government mandates and regulations. Indiana's restaurants are projected to register $9.2 billion in sales for this year. Restaurants across the state account for 296,100 jobs, or 10% of Indiana's workforce. Finally this evening, the release of statewide ISTEP results from this past spring has not come without some concern among local educators, including those in the Northeast Dubois School District. During last night's Northeast Dubois School Board meeting, as we mentioned earlier, the board heard more about scores across the district from Curriculum Director Kathy Clawwitter. In the Northeast Dubois District, numbers were generally above the state's average pass rate in grades 3 through 8 on both the English Language Arts, or ELA, and the math portions of the exam. The lone exception was 8th grade ELA scores, where 71% of 8th graders in the Northeast Dubois District passed, versus 73% of 8th graders statewide that passed. Clawwitter says the general trend of this year's scores is not all that different from past years for the district.
The general trend is very consistent with scores that we've had in the past. There are some slightly, actually just by a single percentage point in many cases, slightly lower scores in some cases, which I attribute to the level of anxiety that was produced by the testing circumstance that we had last spring.
Statewide, this past spring's ISTEP exam was marred by problems with the test. Many students across the state, including a large number of students at Northeast Dubois Middle School, were kicked out of the test for periods of time due to a glitch with test provider CTB McGraw-Hill's online test. Clawwitter says in Northeast Dubois' case, the test would collapse for long periods of time. She says the problems only added to the anxiety of the students.
First of all, there was anxiety just in terms of wondering whether or not they would get into the test. But the next level of anxiety was that they would get into the middle of testing and the system would crash. They didn't know if their answers were being saved. In some cases, their answers were not saved. They'd have to start back again at the beginning of the test. So there were a lot of different circumstances in which the testing environment was not conducive to producing optimal results.
During the discussion at last night's meeting, several board members expressed their concerns about teaching the test rather than teaching the students. This concern was echoed by Claw Witter, and she says the high stakes of the test have changed the way that things are taught in the classroom.
When a test has so many high stakes connected to the grades that a school gets and to the rating that an educator gets, it limits the scope of curriculum to provide for the greatest possible success on the test, rather than being focused on what works best to learn.
An independent investigation into the ISTEP glitches conducted by the National Center for the Improvement of Educational Assessment showed that the glitches did not affect the test for the majority of students across the state. However, it was recommended that about 1,400 test results be invalidated in order to ensure the integrity of this year's ISTEP test. Coming up after the break, your local forecast, sports with Kurt Buchsel, and Inform featuring Joseph Schoenbeckler talking about the upcoming Harvest Home Festival. That's all up next here on 18 WJTS News. Local people watching local people.